Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the creaking, iron-bound gates of a medieval castle where cold stone walls, smoky hearths, and echoing footsteps become your whole world. You're not a knight or a noble lord, though. Nope, you're a kid. Maybe the blacksmith's son, maybe the daughter of a minor noble, sent here for education, aka endless chores. Chickens flap past your ankles. Somewhere nearby, a soldier barks an order. You can already feel the damp creeping into your boots, and you just arrived. You probably won't survive this, just saying. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your locations and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward past the looming drawbridge, boots squelching in old mud and straw. The wooden gatehouse above is manned by guards who barely glance down kids like you. Come and go all the time. Most don't come back. Above, high stone walls rear up into a cloudy sky, flags flapping listlessly in the wind. You half expect a dragon to poke its head over a parapet, but instead, it's just a bored archer picking his teeth. The air smells of ash, manure, and wet dog. Welcome to your new home. Inside the outer courtyard, life bustles, but not in a cozy way. There's a sweaty cook shouting about missing onions. A chicken runs under a cart, pursued by a girl with bare feet and a basket. You spot a boy about your age tugging at a stubborn goat. Everyone's doing something, no one's smiling. You're led by a steward, an older man with a nose like a crooked carrot, toward the inner bailey. This is where the castle's real work happens. The workshops, the kitchens, the smithy, and yes, the great hall. You're told to stand up straight about 15 times before even crossing the second gate. Smile and bow if the Lord passes. The steward growls, "Don't speak unless spoken to, and for the love of St. Cuthbert, don't touch the tapestries." You nod. Not that you've ever seen a tapestry in your life. Most kids entering castle life don't stroll in with a suitcase. If you're from a noble family, you might come with a servant and a couple of battered trunks. But if you're a peasant child, brought in to serve, all you have is the shirt on your back and whatever hope you smuggled inside your woolen sleeves. Some kids are here to learn, others are just cheap labor. And yet, for all the danger and grime, so there's a strange wonder to it. The echoing clatter of hooves in the stables, the rhythmic clang of the smith's hammer, the distant chant of monks at prayer. You've never seen buildings so tall, never seen stone carved into towers, never felt so small. You're led into the outer chamber of the great hall. It's huge, cold, drafty. The windows are just narrow slits, glass is too expensive. A fire roars at the far end, but it doesn't do much. The walls are hung with faded banners and animal skins. You spot a boar's head nailed over the doorway, its glassy eyes watching your every move. This is where the Lord eats, where he holds court, where his children might actually play, if they're not being tutored in Latin or posture. Speaking of posture, you're already being corrected again. Chin up, eyes down, knees together. You're not even sitting, and they want your knees together. A girl in fine but scratchy-looking velvet watches from a wooden bench. Her hair's braided tight enough to hurt. She looks bored, maybe noble, definitely not friendly. You look away quickly. If you're lucky, you'll be assigned kitchen duties. It's hot, crowded, and sometimes you get to sneak burnt pie crusts. If you're unlucky, chamber pots, or worse, the stable's muddy, noisy, and with more biting than you'd expect, and not just from the animals. Historians still argue whether most castle children had any formal schooling at all. It probably depended on your birth. Noble kids learned to read mostly religious texts. peasant kids learned to scrub floors without complaining too much. But even nobles didn't have childhood like we think of it today. You were expected to act like a little adult by the time your voice cracked. A quirky little fact, some castles had groom of the stool roles even for younger boys' kids whose entire job was helping a lord in the bathroom. If that sounds gross, it's because it was. But in a twisted way, it was also prestigious, weird, medieval logic for you. The steward shows you the servant quarters' stone walls, straw beds, one thin blanket if you're lucky, and rats that aren't shy. It's cold. It's cramped, and someone's already crying softly in the corner. You'll be up before the sun tomorrow, sweeping soot from the hearth. You claim a spot in the corner and sit, listening to the quiet breathing, the snoring, and the occasional whimper. Somewhere above, behind heavy oak doors, the noble children sleep in their own rooms, probably not much warmer, but with fluffier blankets and far fewer fleas. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come easy. You're thinking about home, wherever that was, wondering how long you'll be stuck here, wondering what tomorrow will bring. A mop, a whip, a lesson, a pie. Welcome to the castle, little one. You've made it through your first day and not even cried yet. Gold star. Just don't touch the tapestries. You wake up before the sun. Not because you want to, no one wants to, but because the steward claps 2 wooden blocks together just outside your chamber, and the sound somehow travels straight into your spine. Your body aches from the stone floor beneath the straw, and your blanket, if you even had one, has slipped off during the night. The air is so cold you can see your breath when you sit up. Your feet protest as they hit the floor. Your socks are damp. Again, the stone walls around you are a lovely shade of damp gray, a color no one asked for, but that every medieval child knows by heart. There's a narrow window letting in just a sliver of pre-dawn light, and the wind whistles through it like a nosy ghost. You shiver, your tunic crumpled beside you. Smells like smoke and cabbage. You pull it on anyway. Across the room, other children stir. Some groan. One girl mutters a prayer. No one talks much this early. There's no point. Talking doesn't warm your fingers or fill your stomach. You're expected to report to your assigned station kitchens, stable, scullery by the time the sun breaks over the battlements. But before that, you do your chores. Yes, chores before work. That's the feudal way. Today, it's your turn to gather firewood from the inner courtyard. The logs are frozen. The wheelbarrow is broken. So, naturally, you drag it by hand. The path is slick with ice. You nearly lose your footing twice. And while it doesn't seem fair that the steward gets to sip warm ale by the fire while you risk your life for damp logs, you remind yourself at least it's not your turn to clean the garderobe. Yet, once you've scraped together enough wood to keep a tiny fire going in the scribe's chamber, you head to the kitchens. Inside, it's chaos, steam, shouting, and the overwhelming smell of onion, lard, and something charred. You squeeze past a red-faced cook who's yelling at a girl for dropping a turnip. The fire crackles in a giant stone hearth. Bread bakes on a flat iron plate. A boy your age stirs porridge with a stick as thick as your wrist. Your task, grind grain with a hand mill. It's not glamorous. It's barely tolerable. The quern stone is heavy. The crank squeaks, and your arms start aching in seconds. But hey, at least you're warm. Sort of. Breakfast is handed out around sunrise. You get a scoop of porridge, watery and lukewarm, in a wooden bowl. No sugar, no butter, just oats. Still, you eat every bite. Some kids lick the bowl. One tries to trade a crust of bread for an extra scoop. He gets cuffed on the ear for it. Historians agree that most castle children had diets low in protein and high in whatever we can find. Milk only for babies, meat for lords, eggs only if the hens cooperated. And while nobles dined on spiced roasts, kids like you scrape the bottom of the pot literally. And yes, there are rats. Big ones. One darts across the kitchen floor, and no one even reacts. It's just part of the wallpaper at this point. You clean your bowl with a scrap of stale bread and head to your next task, scrubbing soot off the main hall's fireplace. Your fingers are already blackened by the time the sun is high enough to bathe the stone floor in dull gold. You work silently. You're not supposed to speak unless spoken to. You hum softly. Though, it helps. Nearby, the noble children begin their day. A boy in a fur-lined tunic struggles with a Latin primer, while his tutor, a priest with a crooked back, points at the letters with a stick. The noble boy yawns, sneaks a piece of dried fig from his pouch, and glares at you like you've personally insulted his ancestry. Quirky tidbit noble children were sometimes taught to read before they learned how to eat properly. Yes, fork and knife skills came after theology. Priorities. You're not expected to learn Latin, but you do learn things, like how to walk quietly, how to avoid the steward when he's had too much ale, how to sew straight, how to fetch quickly, and how to pretend you didn't hear the Lord yelling at his wife last night. Later, you're sent to haul buckets of water from the well. The bucket's rope bites into your fingers, and it takes several tries to pull up anything not filled with leaves or suspicious little floaters. You carry it carefully, arms straining, sloshing just a little as you pass under the archways. One kid trips and spills his whole load. He's sent back immediately with a broom, not to clean the water, to clean the mud he made on the stone floor. One fringe detail some chroniclers mention castle wells weren't always deep or sanitary. In some cases, water had to be fetched from outside the walls, a risky errand if you were under siege. So, be glad this is just a normal Thursday and not a siege day. Those are worse. By midday, you're allowed a break. By break, we mean sitting quietly with your back against the stable wall, eating another crust of bread and wondering why your stomach still sounds like a thunderstorm. A stable boy shares a boiled onion with you, possibly the most flavor you've had in weeks. You're so moved, you almost cry. He shrugs. My dad's a cook, he says. We get the rejects. You finish your meal as bells chime from the chapel tower. Time to go again. The afternoon is filled with cleaning rushes, those straw floor coverings that make you sneeze, sharpening knives with a whetstone, and helping repair a broken stool leg with a hammer that looks like it once belonged to Thor. You glance at the castle walls as dusk begins to fall. They're tall, gray, and forever. You wonder what's beyond them. You wonder what your family is doing, or if they're thinking of you at all. As the sun slips behind the horizon, torches are lit. The great hall glows with flickering warmth. You catch the sound of a lute being played, and for a second, you imagine yourself in there, dancing with the noble children, eating roast duck and laughing at jokes you don't understand. But no, you're not invited. Your job now washing the dishes. You reach into the icy basin, fingers going numb, scrubbing crusted meat grease off trenchers, flat slabs of stale bread used as plates. You scrape, rinse, stack, and try not to cry when the cook scolds you for being slow as a molasses cow. Finally, you're released. Back to the sleeping chamber. Your straw mattress hasn't gotten any softer. Your tunic is still itchy, but you fall into sleep fast tonight. Your dreams are odd firelight, flying chickens, and a very angry goat wearing a crown. Tomorrow will be the same, maybe harder, but for now, you've survived another day in the cold stone world. Your stomach growls before your eyes even open. That gnawing ache isn't new, you've gotten used to it. Sort of like the rats, or the drafts in the wall that whisper you'll never be warm again in the dead of night. The day begins, as it always does, with you stumbling out of your damp bedding, feet smacking the cold floor like startled fish. And soon enough, it's time for the worst part of castle life. Breakfast. You line up with the others in the dim kitchen, your wooden bowl in hand. A large pot steams in the center of the room, bubbling with what could generously be called porridge. It's a grayish paste, with bits of something floating in it. Barley, maybe, or oat husks, possibly crushed beetle. You don't ask. No one asks. That's the rule. The cook slops a ladleful into your bowl. "Don't waste it," she mutters, as if this is a 5-star feast. You sit on a rough bench by the hearth, bowl steaming in your lap. One boy next to you found a pebble in his scoop. He pretends it's a nut, just for the fun of it. You both laugh quietly, because laughing is rare and it makes the food go down easier. Feeding children in a feudal castle wasn't anyone's top priority. Historians agree that children were expected to eat after the adults, often with what was left, which, if you think about it, is not super reassuring when what's left includes boiled turnip peels and broth made from bones that have already been chewed on. Twice, you scrape the bottom of your bowl and get back to work. But the growling doesn't stop. It just gets quieter, like your belly's trying not to cause trouble. Later in the day, there's talk of a special meal. The Lord is hosting guests. That means the kitchens are in full panic. You get reassigned peeling onions until your eyes sting so badly you can't tell if it's the fumes or your own existential despair. Roasts are being turned on spits. Sacks of flour are hauled in for fresh bread. The smell is incredible, like heaven. If heaven involved large amounts of goose fat, and here's the kicker, you don't get any. Well, you might get a crust. Maybe a spoonful of dripping if you're lucky or extremely charming. You are neither today. There's a girl whose job is to stack the trenches, those slabs of day-old bread that act as edible plates. Sometimes, after the lords eat, the trenches are given to the poor or to the dogs. You try not to take that personally. In some castles, leftover trenches were actually sent to the village as alms for the poor. Other times, they were tossed into the pig slop. Historians still argue whether this was kindness or just creative waste management. Either way, you'd eat one in a heartbeat. By evening, your stomach is doing backflips. The scraps from the noble feast are handed out to the kitchen staff. You wait, wide-eyed, and are rewarded with half a boiled carrot and a smear of something meaty that you lick off your fingers like it's jam. Across the room, a stable boy actually tears up over a cube of cheese. You get it. That cheese is the highlight of the week. Let's not forget the bread. If you're a noble child, your bread is white and soft, made from sifted flour, carefully kneaded, and baked in a clean oven. If you're not noble, your bread is dark, hard, and often gritty with bits of ground stone. Turns out, millstones wear down over time, and little pebbles end up in the dough. So yes, castle kids probably had terrible dental problems. You try not to think about it while you chew. There's no such thing as a snack. No surprise apples or midnight cookies. The concept of "I'm bored. Let's grab something from the pantry" just doesn't exist here, unless you count stealing, which you've definitely thought about. Especially when you pass the pantry and see wheels of cheese, sacks of nuts, and even jars of honey tucked up on the top shelf like golden secrets. But stealing food is risky. You know a boy who tried it last month. He got caught. Spent a night in the cold cellar, chained to a barrel of pickled herring. He still twitches when he smells vinegar. Instead, you wait for mealtime like everyone else. You learn patience. You learn how to chew slowly. You learn how to savor a boiled beet like it's dessert. You start ranking meals in your head. Slightly salted porridge is better than straight from the cauldron porridge, which is better than, oh no, there's a feather in it, porridge. And once in a while, a miracle happens. A feast. Not for nobles. Not for guests, for everyone. Maybe it's a holy day. Maybe someone important got married. Maybe the harvest was extra good. Whatever the reason. Tonight, you find yourself holding a chunk of roasted meat. Actual meat. You barely remember how to chew it. There's laughter, joking, Kids holding sticky fingers up in the firelight like trophies. For a few hours, you're not just surviving, you're living. You get seconds, maybe thirds. You even sneak a piece into your sleeve for tomorrow, which of course gets squished and turns into a grease spot. But still, victory. One fringe note from old manuscripts: some castle kitchens had cats specifically kept for mouse patrol. And sometimes, kids swore those cats knew exactly when scraps were coming. You've seen it. There's a ginger tabby in the kitchen now, sitting near the hearth, licking its paw like it owns the place. It probably does. As the feast ends and the torches are doused, you're left with a full belly for once. The ache is gone, replaced with warmth. You lie in your scratchy bed, licking the salt from your fingers, dreaming of apples and cheese and a life where every day ends like this. Of course, it won't. But for tonight, you're not hungry. The sun hasn't even bothered to climb over the battlements yet, and already you're being shaken awake by a snoring older boy who mumbles something about the scribe needing hands. You blink, yawn, stretch and remember, with a deep sigh. That rest is not your right. It's a temporary condition. In the castle, even childhood has a job description. Today, you're heading to school. Don't get too excited. There's no chalkboard, no neat rows of desks, and definitely no snacks. Just a priest with a perpetual scowl, a stiff wooden stool, and a firm belief that Latin builds character. If you're of noble birth and you've got the good boots to prove it, your education involves rote memorization of prayers, fables, and the odd moral tale involving saints or wolves or both. The priest drones on in a sing-song rhythm, tapping his stick against the wall for punctuation. Amo, amas, amat, he chants. You mutter the words after him like a ghost with stage fright. For the rest of us, there's less Latin and more sweeping. You might learn basic arithmetic if you're apprenticing to the steward or blacksmith, especially if you're going to help with ledgers or inventory. Otherwise, your lessons are more practical, like how to chop kindling without losing a finger, or the subtle art of scrubbing rushes. One of the cook's helpers swears he learned to read from old recipe scrolls. He can spell ale and onion perfectly, which, in his opinion, covers most emergencies. Historians still argue whether castle schooling for non-nobles was common or just a rare luxury. Some suggest that if a child showed real potential or had a sympathetic lord, they might be taught to read, write, or even recite scripture. But for most, education came through calluses, not books. Today, though, you're lucky enough to sit in on a noble lesson. You're not technically allowed, but the scribe likes having someone to refill the inkwell. You perch silently on a low stool as the young lord's daughter recites her psalms. She fidgets. The priest sighs. You sneak glances at the parchment in front of her. It's beautiful. The letters loop and curl like vines. The ink smells sharp, and the parchment real. Smooth parchment is the most expensive thing you've ever seen up close. You wonder what it feels like to hold the quill, to leave marks on the world. Meanwhile, the priest is now lecturing on moral purity, using the thrilling tale of a boy who disobeyed his father and got eaten by a bear. You stare wide-eyed. The noble girl rolls her eyes. This is her fourth bear story this week. Outside the Great Hall, other kids are deep in their own lessons. One older boy is learning to sand wood without splinters. A girl is being shown how to stir porridge without scorching the bottom. Another is practicing bowing and curtsying to an imaginary lord, which is both sad and hilarious depending on your mood. Etiquette is part of castle education, especially if you're noble. You have to learn how to eat without making slurping noises, a skill surprisingly rare, how to sit without fidgeting, and how to express mild interest in falconry even if you hate birds. There's a whole hierarchy of gestures, how low to bow to a knight versus a baron, when to speak, when not to breathe too loudly, get it wrong, and you're dismissed or worse, humiliated at dinner. A quirky little detail: some noble children were actually taught to dance as part of their lessons. Not for fun, heaven forbid, but for court presentations and feast days. You once saw the young lord practicing in the solar, stepping stiffly as a lute player strummed nearby. He looked like he was being slowly stung by bees, but with dignity. Your own version of dance class is balancing a tray of pitchers without spilling any. Spoiler alert, you fail. Twice. The steward gives you that look. You know the one. Midday brings a shift to duties. Lessons are done for the nobles. Anyway, and you're sent to assist the scribe. He's an old man with trembling fingers and the personality of a moldy potato. But he doesn't talk much, which you appreciate. You help by fetching sand to dry the ink, arranging scrolls by size, not topic, oddly, and holding the candles when the wind gets uppity. Once, he lets you practice drawing a single letter, an A, wide and jagged. It looks like a drunken tent, but you feel proud. You made a mark. You've heard whispers about a boy, once a servant, who learned to read so well he became a monk. You're not sure if it's true, but you hold on to it anyway. In a place like this, hope is contraband, smuggled, risky, precious, as the afternoon stretches. You pass through the yard where a group of noble boys are practicing sword forms with wooden blades. They're about your age, some younger, and already expected to fight someday. You watch as they grunt and parry, sweat glistening, instructors barking commands. It's like school, but with bruises. One catches your gaze. He sneers. What are you looking at? Bucket boy. You look away. Fast, in castles. Your social rank is basically tattooed on your soul. Doesn't matter how smart or kind or even well-fed you are, which you're not. If you're born noble, you get books, blades, and boredom. If not, you get blisters. Still, you learn. Every day. Just not from a scroll. You learn to read faces, to spot mood shifts, to dodge a thrown ladle or recognize when someone's about to dump chamber pot contents out a high window. Your education is survival. And, quietly, you're getting better at it. As evening falls, you pass the chapel. The priest's voice echoes softly through the arched door, intoning vespers in Latin. The noble children kneel inside, backs straight, heads bowed. You pause outside, just long enough to hear the last Amen before hurrying back to your quarters. You've learned a lot today. You've learned that school in a castle is more about your station than your mind. You've learned that letters are power, etiquette is armor, and even the act of listening can be dangerous or sacred, depending on who you are. You've also learned that onions make your eyes leak, and that's important too. Today, you wake up scratching. Not metaphorically, you're actually scratching. Your tunic, your back, your scalp. It's like sleeping in a haystack full of fleas, which, let's be honest, is basically what your bedding is. And your clothes. They don't help. You sit up, sigh, and begin the daily ritual of forcing your way into layers of itchy fabric that seem specially designed to test your tolerance for discomfort. Castle clothes, to put it gently, are not the stuff of bedtime fairy tales. Your undertunic is coarse linen that's stiff in the winter and clingy in the summer. Over that goes your main tunic, thick wool, dyed a dull brownish gray, a shade best described as mud with ambition. A simple rope belt cinches it at the waist. You thread it quickly, hoping today's knots will hold. Shoes, if you have them, are leather and stiff as bark. If not, good luck avoiding splinters. You once saw a kid get a goose quill jammed between his toes from running barefoot across the scribe's chamber. He limped for days and no one even blinked. Most kids here don't have a rotating wardrobe. You have a tunic, singular, maybe a second one. If you're noble or incredibly lucky or have an uncle who's a tailor, washing your clothes, not common. bathing. Even less so, you air things out when you can and try to ignore the smell. Everyone else smells too. It sort of blends into one grand medieval bouquet: wood smoke, onions, wet wool, and child. The noble children have it slightly better. Their clothes are still scratchy, but more elaborate. The young lord wears a blue tunic with embroidery around the collar, wheat patterns stitched by some unlucky servant girl who now has eyes like a mole. The noble girl in the solar has puffed sleeves and little cloth buttons that serve absolutely no purpose except to say, "I'm richer than you." Historians know that clothing in the medieval castle wasn't just about fashion, it was social code. Nobles wore colors like blue, green, and even crimson, depending on the dyes available. Those dyes were expensive, often made from plants or even crushed bugs. Yes, bugs. The rich wore Beetlejuice with pride. Meanwhile, the rest of you were lucky if your tunic wasn't patched in 7 places. And speaking of patches, yours are stitched with clumsy X's done by your own hands. One sleeve is shorter than the other. A hole near your hip is covered with a swatch of what might have once been curtain fabric. You call it character. The steward calls it unsightly. There's no such thing as casual Friday in a feudal castle. Clothes serve a purpose: warmth, protection, and clear status signaling. Even your hat, if you wear one, tells people where you stand. The cook has a cloth cap crusted with flour. The stable boy wears a woolen cap with ear flaps, one half torn from a dog encounter. The young lord has a velvet cap with a single feather. You once saw it fall off and considered grabbing it. But then you remembered children who touch noble hats often get mysterious new chores. A fun, fringe tidbit: some castles used urine to help clean wool. Not yours, hopefully, but someone's. It helped strip oils from the fabric. So if your tunic smells just a bit funky, well, you're not imagining things. Mid-morning, you're summoned to help fold linens in the laundry area, which is a fancy way of saying the icy part of the outer bailey where women yell at you for wrinkling things. You work beside a girl named Meg, who's trying to scrub stains out of the lord's undergarments with a stiff brush and a look of despair. She glances at you. "Reckon lords have different stains than us?" she asks. You both pause, then burst out laughing. You get shushed immediately, but it's worth it. Not all clothes are terrible, you admit. On feast days, if the lord is feeling generous, the children are allowed to borrow nicer tunics from the storehouse, a closet full of mothball-scented garments that fit no one properly. You once wore a velvet robe so long it dragged behind you like a tail. You felt royal for about 15 seconds until you tripped on it and knocked over a tray of pears. The castle tailor, one of the more respected craftsmen, doesn't make clothes for children unless specifically ordered. Even noble kids mostly wear hand-me-downs until they stop growing like bean sprouts. You overhear a lady complain that her son's sleeves are embarrassingly last season. You silently wonder what season she's talking about, since nothing in this place changes except how muddy the ground is. There's a lot of layering involved in dressing, especially in winter. Wool over linen, cloak over wool, hood over head. It's like being wrapped in a portable fireplace, one that smells like damp sheep. But it helps. A thin layer of warmth between your skin and the unyielding chill of castle corridors can mean the difference between sleep and shivering. As the day stretches on, you're reassigned to help prepare garments for an upcoming festival. That means brushing cloaks with stiff combs, refastening toggles, and pretending you know the difference between slate gray and mud gray. A noble girl walks by, holding up a gown trimmed in ermine soft. White, and definitely not meant for chasing geese in the yard. Don't touch, she warns. You don't. But you imagine what it feels like. You imagine what she would feel like sleeping in straw. You imagine switching lives. Then remember how hard it was to breathe when the steward made you try on a noble tunic once just for fun, translation for mockery. The thing about castle clothing is it's not just fabric, it's armor. It tells people what you're allowed to do, where you're allowed to go, and how much trouble you're likely to cause. You learn to read tunics like scrolls. A wool doublet means someone who carries tools. Fur trim means someone who carries favor. A filthy hem, someone who's been dragging buckets all day. Just like you. As the evening fire crackles in the hearth, you sit by the wall, rubbing your sleeves between your fingers, willing them to feel soft just once. They don't. But they're dry. And today, that feels like a small miracle. You scratch your shoulder again. Shrug. Maybe tomorrow, you'll sew on another patch. And maybe it'll be in a color that isn't brown. You wake to the sound of wooden buckets clattering, followed by the unmistakable thwack of a mop hitting stone. Someone's already sweeping. Someone else is muttering about spilled barley. You groan, stretch, and try to remember what day it is, but it doesn't matter. In a castle, every day is the same rhythm work first. Play. If anyone remembers to let you. There's no official schedule. But you've memorized the cadence of castle life. The morning belongs to chores, the afternoon to slightly different chores, and the evening to squinting into the fire and wondering where your youth went. Your first task. Fetch water. Again. You trudge to the courtyard, bucket in hand, avoiding the pile of horse droppings someone was supposed to clean yesterday. You get to the well, lower the rope, and haul up water that smells faintly of moss and something that may or may not be frog-related. But it's water. You carry it back carefully, splash only a little, and get exactly 0 thanks for it. Then it's on to your second task, assisting in the laundry. Not with the fine garments, oh no. You're on rag duty, scrubbing blood-stained cloths and muddy hose, the kind that's been soaked in who knows what and left to marinate for several days. It's disgusting. Your fingers prune up. You briefly consider cutting them off, just so you'll never have to do this again. But hey, at least it's not pig duty. You've had pig duty once. Just once. It haunts your dreams. Work is your default state. If you're not busy, someone will find something for you to do. If you look like you're not busy, you might as well be painting a target on your back that says, "Assign me extra rush sweeping." And yes, sweeping the rushes is a thing. You're expected to keep the floor tidy, even though people walk all over it all day long. There's straw, herbs, dirt, and the occasional mystery bone. You once found a tooth. You didn't ask. Playtime, if you're lucky, happens in the slivers between chores. A stolen moment behind the stables. A quick game of knuckle bones using actual sheep knuckles. Or a round of chicken chase where the goal is unclear but the laughter is real. Most toys are handmade. A carved wooden horse. A ball made from stitched scraps and stuffed with rags. A spinning top with one broken edge that makes it dance wildly off course. Sometimes a guard might whittle you a figure from firewood if he's feeling generous and hasn't been yelled at that day. One older boy, Tobin, once made a puppet using a stick, some thread, and a bit of cloth from a torn curtain. He named it Lady Pricklebottom. It was wildly inappropriate and even funnier because of it. Until the steward caught wind and Lady Pricklebottom was never seen again. A moment of silence. Please. Historians suggest that children in feudal castles had far less time for play than their village counterparts, since castle life meant more adult expectations. But that didn't stop kids from making time between chores, during meals, even while hauling buckets, if you had the right company. A quirky fact. Some castles actually had designated play areas for noble children, tiny gardens or side courtyards where they could run, tumble, and pretend they weren't future chess pieces in marriage alliances. You peeked into one once. There was a swing made of rope and a tireless nanny who looked like she could lift a cart with one arm. It looked fine, but oddly dull. You suspect the noble kids weren't allowed to yell. Back in your world, yelling is encouraged as long as no adults hear you. You and 2 other kids invent a game involving a spoon, a pebble, and a one-eyed cat named Cheese. The rules are unclear, but it ends in Cheese knocking the pebble directly into someone's soup and fleeing like a furry thunderbolt. 10 points to Cheese. That short burst of fun ends as all things do with someone being assigned extra dung-shoveling duty. Today it's you. You sigh and accept your fate. Afternoons bring different kinds of work. You might help the cook sort herbs mostly dried, mostly confusing, or carry messages across the castle grounds. Once, you delivered a note to the armory and were nearly decapitated by a distracted apprentice swinging a sword. That's when you learn to knock first. Some kids are apprenticed by now, if you're 10 or older, and lucky or cursed. Depending on who you ask, you're paired with a tradesman blacksmith, baker, mason, tailor. That means a future, but also less freedom. Apprentices work from sun-up to sundown with maybe half a sausage to show for it. You're not quite there yet, but the cook's assistant keeps eyeing you like she's planning to claim you. You're not sure how to feel about that. The noble children are also busy, but their work looks different. Riding lessons, chess, Latin tutoring, practicing the lute, badly. One noble girl once tried embroidery, stabbed herself with the needle 3 times, and declared it a peasant sport. She's now learning harp. It's somehow worse. There's one boy a page who takes his duties seriously. He polishes armor until it shines, memorizes courtly greetings, and practices sword forms with a broom. You admire him. You also pity him. He's 12, going on 40, already weighed down by duty and noble expectations. You, meanwhile, are weighed down by a bucket of potato peelings, which feels somehow heavier. Historians debate whether the strict division between work and play was as rigid as we imagine. Some records suggest castle kids could laugh and play when no one was looking. Others insist discipline was constant, enforced with cuffs and cold shoulders. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, like the stew you had last week that tasted vaguely like both onions and despair. As evening falls, you and a few others gather near the hearth. The cook's boy tells a wild story about a ghost that haunts the West Tower. You all lean in, wide-eyed, until the steward barks your names and you scatter like startled geese. Back in your chamber, you collapse onto your straw bed, muscles aching, cheeks still warm from the laughter. You're tired, really tired, but that 5 minutes of play, worth it. Because even here, where work is endless, where your hands are cracked and your tunic smells like cabbage, you manage to laugh. And laughter, say in a feudal castle, is the rarest kind of magic. You wake up to rain, not a gentle sprinkle, but the sort of cold, slanting rain that seeps through stone and bone alike. It drums on the wooden shutters, seeps between the cracks in the walls, and somehow manages to make your already soggy bedding feel even soggier. Welcome to castle weather, always damp, occasionally miserable, and never considerate of your plans. The great myth about castles is that they're these grand, cozy fortresses, warm and crackling with firelight. The truth, you've seen soup freeze in the Great Hall. Okay, not really, but close enough, especially in winter. The stone walls are thick. Sure, but insulation isn't exactly a thing yet. No glass windows either, unless you're noble, and even those are tiny, barely enough to stick your head through, let alone warm a room. Most windows are just open slits with wooden shutters that rattle in the wind like angry ghosts. You tuck your tunic tighter around your body and try to imagine sunshine. Doesn't help. The castle is built for defense, not comfort. You're constantly reminded of that when you shiver in the hallway or try to sleep through the wind howling like a banshee through the corridors. Everything echoes. Every creak, every footstep, every rat scampering across the beams above your head. Speaking of rats, yes, they're here. They live in the walls, the pantry, under the rushes, and one horrifying time, in a basket of apples. You learn to live with them. Historians argue whether castles were truly infested or whether modern writers exaggerate. You'd like to invite those historians here for one night. Then we'll talk. You step outside into the courtyard to begin your day's tasks. The rain has turned the ground into mud soup. Your boots, if you're wearing any, squelch unpleasantly. If you're barefoot, well, congratulations, you've earned the sensation known as peasant spa. It comes with a side of frostbite. The sky is a flat sheet of grey. Smoke from the kitchen chimney curls lazily upward, and the guards huddle beneath awnings, cloaks pulled tight, miserable as the rest of you. Weather affects everything. If it rains too hard, no one uses the courtyard for training. If the snow comes in thick, supply wagons stop. If there's lightning, the chapel fills up fast. Even knights get nervous around lightning. Something about steel helmets and divine punishment. Inside, the air doesn't get much warmer. Fires are kept in specific places, mostly the kitchen and great hall. You're lucky if a nearby hearth is burning. And even then, only those with permission can linger near it. That means noble kids, the steward, and sometimes the priest. You warm your hands for 2 minutes and get shooed off by a guard with breath like onions and disappointment. Still, you find clever ways to stay warm. One trick stuffing dried straw between your tunic and undertunic. It itches, but it helps. Another standing near the oven while pretending to scrub something. A dangerous move, you might actually get asked to scrub something. But if you're quick, you get a blast of hot air and maybe a whiff of something savory. Risk high. Reward slightly less frostbite. You spend the rest of the morning mopping up water near the chapel entrance. Apparently, wet rushes smell worse than dry ones. Who knew? Everyone knew. As you work, you hear the wind rattle the doors. Somewhere up high, a shutter bangs open and shut. You pray it doesn't fall on someone's head. Again, later, you're sent to the larder. It's your job to check for mold. Spoiler alert, you find some mold in the corners, on bread, on cheese. It grows like it's trying to take over. You tell the cook's assistant, who shrugs. Scrape it off, she says. Good as new. A fringe detail people in castles believe that moldy food could still be eaten if you just cut the bad parts off. This worked sometimes, other times not so much. One boy spent a week with the runs after eating questionable goat cheese. He still walks funny. The day drags on. Rain means the floors are slick, the corridors are dark, and everything smells faintly of mildew. You get assigned to help the stable master. The horses aren't happy either. Their hay is damp. Their hooves are muddy. One sneezes on you. You take it as a blessing. At least it's warm. Noble children mostly stay inside when it rains. They study by candlelight or play board games, often ones you're not allowed to touch. You've seen them gathered in the solar, playing Nine Men's Morris or something with little carved pieces that look suspiciously expensive. One day, you'll sneak in and learn the rules. But today, you just watch through the half-open door while pretending to sweep, occasionally. Bad weather means something exciting indoor entertainments. If the Lord is feeling generous or just bored, a traveling bard might be invited to perform in the hall. That means stories, songs, maybe even juggling if the bard is especially desperate for coin. You once saw a fire eater. That was the best night of your life. Tonight, there's no bard. Just the regular entertainment of peeling onions and praying you don't get assigned to clean the outer stairs. Rain collects there like it's auditioning to become a moat. But by now, you know how to cope. You wrap your cloak tighter, find the driest wall to lean against, and listen to the rain. It becomes background music, steady, rhythmic, almost peaceful if you squint hard enough. One older girl swears by a secret warming trick, heated stones wrapped in cloth, tucked under your blanket. You try it once and burn your elbow. Worth it? Probably. As night settles in, torches flicker against the damp walls. The castle feels smaller, more closed in. You hear thunder in the distance and wonder if the outer wall will hold during the next big storm. It usually does. Usually. You lie down in your damp straw bedding. The roof creaks above you. You shiver, then roll closer to the wall. It's not warm, but it's solid. That counts for something. Weather in a castle is relentless. Cold in winter, stifling in summer, and wet in every season in between. But you learn to live with it. You adapt. You get stronger. And tomorrow, there's always a chance the sun might show up. You're woken by something heavy thudding against the door. Then another. You sit up fast, heart racing. Is it bandits? An ogre. Some angry ghost finally fed up with all the nighttime whistling. Nope, it's just a guard dumping firewood. Still, your pulse doesn't settle right away because castle life always comes with the possibility of attack. It's not a maybe. It's a when. And you, small and unimportant as you may feel, are still a part of the fortress machine. You're not a soldier, obviously. Not yet. But you are a pair of fast-moving hands and sharp eyes, which is more valuable than you'd expect when the castle's defense relies on everyone playing their part, including kids like you. Today, you're on errand duty for the watchman. You scurry up to the ramparts, the narrow walkway atop the curtain wall, where the wind tries to throw you off like a jealous sibling. You pass men wrapped in cloaks, peering out through the battlements, looking for anything suspicious smoke, approaching riders, or worse, a siege engine. You glance out too, just trees and mist, but your imagination fills in the gaps. Somewhere out there, beyond the forests, are rival lords and desperate mercenaries with nothing better to do than poke holes in your walls, or steal your food, or both. A soldier explains your job if the horn sounds. You run, not away but toward the main courtyard. You're to carry messages, help gather arrows, maybe even toss boiling water from the murder holes if things get really bad. You nod, trying not to look terrified. The castle is full of defensive quirks, some of which you've explored on your own, don't tell the steward. There's the secret stairwell behind the chapel, the narrow twist in the back corridor where spears are stored, the hole in the wall near the pantry that opens into a shaft you could probably climb through if your life depended on it. One weird detail. Some castles had beehives built into the outer walls, designed to release angry bees on attackers. Historians still debate whether this was brilliant, dangerous, or the medieval version of let's try anything once. You've never seen the bees deployed, but you believe the legend. You've met the bees. They're not friendly. At midday, the blacksmith lets you watch as he and the apprentice shape new arrowheads. Sparks fly. The heat is intense. He doesn't say much, but you learn by watching. You wonder how many arrows the castle has. How many would be enough if danger came over the hills? It's not just the guards who prepare. Everyone trains in their own way. The cook knows how to seal barrels fast, in case food needs to be moved or hidden. The steward keeps a list of who sleeps where, so heads can be counted in emergencies. Even the priest has a big iron key that opens the chapel's hidden door. You didn't even know the chapel had a hidden door. Your role. Mostly running, sometimes fetching, occasionally watching, always listening. There was a scare last year. A neighboring baron rode close to the castle, his banner flying low, for a whole day. The guards stayed on the walls, bows in hand. Children were kept indoors. Fires were lit on the tower signals for nearby allies. You remember the tension, the silence between footsteps, the clench in your stomach that didn't loosen for hours. Then the Baron turned back. No attack came, but the feeling lingered. Noble children. Meanwhile, train formally. If they're boys, they learn to ride, handle weapons, understand tactics. Pages are expected to carry armor, help in battles, and eventually become squires. You once saw the young lord being fitted for his training helmet? He looked like a turtle trying to read. Even noble girls aren't off the hook. They're taught how to run a household, which sounds boring until you realize it includes stockpiling supplies, rationing food, and organizing servants in case the men are away fighting. Power in its own right. You know of a girl named Ela, daughter of a knight. She can shoot a short bow better than most of the garrison. She once claimed she could hit a chicken at 20 paces. Someone bet her a loaf of bread. She didn't miss. At dusk, you're assigned to refill the torches along the inner wall. It's quiet, eerie. You carry the oil-soaked bundles carefully, watching the flames flicker in the wind. One torch sputters out. You relight it, hands trembling. As night closes in, the castle transforms. Gates are locked. Guards double up. The dogs are loosed in the outer yard. You hear one barking into the dark. Just a fox, probably, or not. You sleep lighter on nights like these. The thing about castles, yes, they're strong. Walls thick enough to stop arrows. Towers designed to give defenders the edge, but they're also vulnerable. Siege towers can roll right up to the gates. Catapults can fling flaming boulders. Starvation is always a threat if supplies run low. You've seen the storehouse? You know it wouldn't last forever. That's why drills are important. Once a month, the horn sounds and everyone has to act like it's real. You rush to your station, heart pounding, even though it's just a test. You line up beside other kids, waiting to pass messages or carry water to the wall. One girl accidentally dumps her bucket on a guard's boot. He glares. You all giggle. Quietly. Historians often wonder how much children truly participated in castle defense. Some say very little. Others argue that in a siege, everyone was a soldier, whether they held a sword or not. You believe the latter. You've seen how fast kids can move, how sharp their eyes are. You've seen courage in small hands. That night, you fall asleep with your shoes on, just in case, because you never know when the horn will blow for real. You wake before dawn to a noise you've come to recognize instantly, the low, steady clanging of pots and pans. Not the panicked clatter of an accident, but the purposeful rhythm of preparation. It can only mean one thing. A feast is coming. And no, this doesn't mean you get to eat until you explode like a medieval grape. It means chaos. It means running, fetching, scrubbing, chopping, lifting, spilling, apologizing, and doing it all faster than seems humanly possible. Feast days are war zones, and children like you are the foot soldiers. The castle has a pulse on days like these. Everyone moves faster, talks louder, yells more. Cooks shout orders with the fury of generals. Servants skitter like beetles with baskets and trays. The steward paces like a storm cloud in a tunic. Even the lord's dog looks stressed. You've been assigned to the kitchen again, lucky you, and that means peeling, slicing, and trying not to lose any fingers to the cleaver. The cook barks at you to fetch onions. You sprint to the storage bins, grab as many as your tunic can carry, and return to find the bread burning. Nobody blames you, but also, they sort of do. Castle feasts were serious business. These events weren't just about food, they were statements of power, wealth, and hospitality. When visiting lords or clergy arrived, the host needed to impress them, and that meant rolling out the culinary red carpet. The menu, you can barely believe it. Roasted meats, spiced stews, honeyed fruits, fish baked in crusts, and those strange little pastries shaped like birds. There's even a pie where, rumor has it, live birds fly out when it's cut. You haven't seen it, but the other kids swear it's real. A quirky detail in some castles. Food wasn't just eaten, it was performed. Dishes were arranged into elaborate scenes, like knights on a battlefield made of bread. or a fish pie decorated with scales made from dyed almonds. The more over the top, the better. Of course, none of this is for you. You get to sneak the leftovers, maybe, if you're fast and no one catches you. Last feast, you snagged a crust of cheese pie and hid behind the barrels to eat it. Best bite of your life. You still dream about it sometimes. The noble children are dressed in their finery. Silk, if they're wealthy. Velvet, if they're really showing off. Their hair is brushed and braided. Their nails mostly clean. The young lord practices how to toast a guest without sounding like a donkey. The noble girl sighs dramatically when someone tells her not to wear her new necklace because it clashes with her sleeves. It's a hard life. Your clothes slightly cleaner than yesterday. You splash some water on your face and call it grooming. One girl sews a tiny flower onto her tunic hem, just for luck. It's already unraveling, but it looks beautiful while it lasts. Midday brings inspection. The steward walks the hall, checking the benches, the banners, the torches, the tapestries. He adjusts a wine jug by a centimeter and mutters about symmetry. You pretend to care deeply about the symmetry of cutlery placement. He nods. You exhale. By evening, the guests begin to arrive. Hooves on the stone bridge, horns, the heavy creak of the gate. You peek from behind a curtain and see the men in fur-trimmed cloaks, women with veils and rings, squires leading snorting horses. They look expensive. Then the feast begins. You're not allowed to sit in the hall, of course. You're in and out, serving, carrying dishes, refilling jugs, mopping spilled wine, and trying not to make eye contact with anyone too important. If you're invisible, you're doing it right. The smells: roast meat, fresh bread, spices, hot wax almost knock you over. You feel drunk on the aroma alone. The music starts lutes, maybe a pipe. Someone sings. Laughter erupts. Goblets clink. One boy drops a tray of eels. They slither dramatically across the floor. He's assigned latrine duty for the next 3 days. You sneak a look at the high table. The lord sits at the center, flanked by his family and honored guests. The platters there are, truly absurd glazed swans, towering pies, a bowl of gilded almonds. There's a rumor one dish is made of peacock stuffed with smaller birds, like a roasted nesting doll. You believe it. Nobles are weird like that. Historians agree that these feasts weren't just about eating, they were political. Every dish was a performance. Every seat, every toast, every bite was part of the castle's power play. Even who got served what first mattered. You see the steward whispering to the server. The bishop gets the pheasant leg, not the wing. Some guests are easier to please than others. One knight eats like a dragon, loud, messy, and with his hands. A lady keeps asking if the bread was blessed. A young page spills cider on a lord's sleeve and nearly combusts from shame. Back in the kitchen, it's chaos. More dishes, more firewood, more wine. A pig is being turned on a spit by a very sweaty apprentice. You mop the floor and trip over a goose. You're fine. The goose is not. Someone says, "We'll use it tomorrow." By the time the feast ends, you're exhausted. Your legs ache. Your fingers are sticky. Your face is flushed from the heat of the ovens. But you did it. You survived a feast day. You don't get a seat at the high table. You don't even get a chair. But when everyone else is asleep, you sit on the cold flagstone floor with 3 other kids and share what you've scrounged: half an apple, a wedge of bread, and, miracle of miracles, a sliver of honey cake. You eat in silence, eyes half closed, grinning like thieves. Because in a castle where food is power, and power belongs to someone else, a single bite of stolen sweetness can feel like victory. You open your eyes to the solemn toll of the chapel bell. It's not the usual morning clatter or the drowsy chiming that marks vespers. This ring is slow. drawn out like the castle itself is holding its breath. Someone has died. You don't know who yet, but you know what to do. Everyone does. Death is no stranger to castle life. You slip on your tunic, quickly braid your hair if you have any long enough, and head out into the grey hush that's fallen over the stone corridors. Down in the courtyard, servants move with unusual care. No shouting, no rushing, just the muted shuffle of feet and the occasional whisper. You spot the steward speaking quietly with the priest. Both have the same tight look on their faces, like they've already dealt with this before, and they probably have. Because in the medieval world, death isn't rare. It visits often. A cold that settles in the lungs, a fall from a horse, a slice from a dull blade that festers instead of heals, or more quietly, a child who stops waking up one day without explanation. Today, it was a night. You learned this from the cook, who heard it from the baker, who heard it from a girl in the solar who may or may not have overheard correctly. But it seems real enough. He was older, she says. Too many battles in his bones. Died in his sleep, clutching his rosary. The castle prepares. There's a routine to it now. The chapel is swept, candles brought out. The body, cleaned and wrapped in a woolen shroud, is laid out in the chapel's rear, head facing east. Nobles will say prayers. The priest will chant. Pages will stand guard with solemn faces, even if they don't fully understand why. You help carry rushes for the chapel floor. It's cold inside, stone everywhere, heavy and still. The crucifix above the altar seems to look straight through you. Someone lights incense, probably to cover the scent, though they say it's for the soul, a fringe detail in some castles. Noble families would bury their dead beneath the chapel itself, believing it brought them closer to heaven. You've stepped over those hidden tombs. Sometimes the floor gives a little underfoot. You pretend not to notice. The younger kids are confused. One boy asks if the knight will wake up tomorrow. No one answers. Another child says he saw the knight just yesterday, walking without his cane. That means his soul is already lighter. Someone says, "You don't know if that's true, but it sounds like something the priest might say." So you nod. Later, there's a procession. The bell rings again. The Lord and his family dress in black. Everyone else wears the darkest thing they own, which for you is just your usual tunic but with your hair combed, which is as formal as it gets. You line the courtyard silently as the body is carried past, wrapped in cloth, tied with ropes, a simple wooden cross laid across the chest. No grand coffin, those are for kings and saints. Just the night and the air around him, heavy with memory. The burial is quick. The ground outside the walls is cold, the wind sharp, earth thuds onto the wrapped body. Prayers are said. Some people cross themselves. Some just watch. You don't cry. You didn't know him well, but you feel it anyway, that sense of something missing, something final. Back inside, the mood is still quiet, but life picks up again. There are hearths to tend, animals to feed, floors to sweep. The dead may be honored, but the living still need dinner. Historians note that medieval children had a complicated relationship with death. It was everywhere in illness, childbirth, accidents, battle. But rather than being hidden, it was part of daily life. Children learn to process grief through ritual, repetition, and faith. You believe that. Today proves it. A few hours later, the page who trained under the knight sneaks off to the stable. You follow, not to spy, just to be near. You find him brushing the knight's horse, slow, careful strokes. He doesn't talk. You don't either, but you both understand. That night, the chapel bell doesn't ring. The stars are out. The corridors are quiet. For the first time in days, you aren't assigned any chores after supper. You find a spot by the hearth. sit close to the flame and listen to the wind brushing past the windows. One girl sings a soft tune, a lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Something about lanterns and rivers and finding your way home. You don't know the words, but the sound wraps around you like a warm blanket. You think about the night, about all the people who've come and gone in these stone walls, about how someday you might leave your own echo here too, and then you sleep, because tomorrow will come and the castle will carry on. You wake to the sound of arguing, nothing new, but this time it's louder than usual. Someone's been accused of stealing bread. Again, you sigh and roll off your straw mat, your back already aching from yesterday's chores. Another day in the castle, another squabble over crumbs. Life inside these stone walls is a constant balance between rules and survival. And yes, even kids like you are subject to castle justice, though what counts as justice depends on who's in charge and how grumpy they are. Today, you're reminded just how many rules you live under. Don't run in the main hall. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't take food unless given. Don't. It's a wonder you managed to move at all. The accused thief is a kitchen boy named Bram. He's small, fast, and always looks hungry. Someone saw him near the pantry. And now there's half a loaf missing. You believe him when he says he didn't take it. But belief doesn't count for much here. The steward brings him before the priest and the lady of the castle. There's no grand trial, just stern questions and shifting eyes. Bram stammers. The priest asks if he swears by God. Bram nods, but his voice cracks. Then the lady does something unexpected. She orders him to spend 3 days helping the chapel servants, no punishment beyond that. A rare mercy. Most of the time, the consequences are harsher extra work, loss of rations, or a beating if the lord is feeling particularly old-fashioned. A historical note, castle justice was swift and not particularly fair. Stealing could be punished by whipping, stocks, or worse. But children were sometimes shown leniency depending on the mood of the noble or priest involved. Some historians argue that children were often treated as small adults. Others believe they received special treatment due to their status or cuteness. You're not sure. You've seen both outcomes. Rules aren't just about discipline. They're about keeping the fragile order intact. In a castle, where dozens, sometimes hundreds live in tight quarters, even small missteps can ripple into real chaos. That's why everything has a system. Where food is stored, when the gate opens, who can speak to whom. And don't even think about going near the armory. One boy did. He just wanted to touch a sword, just once. He didn't even pick it up, just brushed his fingers along the hilt. He was caught before he reached the door, dragged away by the sleeve, and made to scrub chamber pots for 2 weeks straight. Even knights avoided him during that time. That's how bad it was. Punishments vary. Some kids get extra work. Others lose their place near the hearth at night. One time, a girl who lied about breaking a pitcher had her dinner taken away for 3 days. She fainted on the second day, and no one said a word. Just helped her up, dusted her off, and carried on. Even noble children aren't completely shielded. They're rarely punished physically, but their missteps earn icy silences, lost privileges, or embarrassing public corrections. You've seen the young lord scolded in front of a dozen servants for forgetting his Latin prayers. His face turned redder than the castle banners. One strange rule you still don't understand. You're not allowed to whistle after dark. The priest says it attracts spirits. The steward says it's annoying. You figure it's probably both. The laws inside the castle aren't written down anywhere you can read, but everyone knows them. You learn by watching, by guessing, by remembering which of your friends got in trouble for what, and adjusting your behavior accordingly. A quirky truth. Some castles have their own unofficial codes passed down like ghost stories. Step on the 3rd stair in the chapel tower. Bad luck. Use the Lord's goblet by accident. Sleep with one eye open. Enter the herb garden at night. The cook's assistant says you'll grow a second nose. Probably not true, but no one's tested it. Today, you keep your head down. You do your tasks. Answer questions with yes, sir, and no, milady. And don't speak unless spoken to. You help scrub the stairs without slipping. You sweep the solar without knocking anything over. You deliver a message to the guards and don't look over the battlements just in case they think you're daydreaming about escape. Still, tension lingers. After Bram's scolding, everyone walks a little straighter, talks a little quieter. That's the thing about punishment, it echoes, even if it doesn't fall on you. By evening, the mood softens. No one else got in trouble today. That's a victory. You and 2 other kids sneak a game of stickball behind the stables. You keep score using pebbles. No one wins. No one cares. You laugh quietly. Even the guards seem to be in a better mood. Then the steward appears. You freeze. But instead of barking orders, he just says, "Be in your beds before moonrise." No noise. You nod. Then run before he changes his mind. That night, as you curl into your bedding, you hear someone whisper a prayer for Bram. He's in the chapel tonight, probably scrubbing pews with cold water and no dinner. You promise yourself you'll bring him a crust tomorrow, because the rules may be iron, but kindness. That's the one part of castle life you get to choose. You wake with your breath puffing in front of you like little ghosts. The castle's colder than usual this morning. And for once, it's not because someone left the shutters open. It's winter. Real winter. And the castle is starting to feel like one giant freezer with walls. You can barely feel your toes as you pull on your tunic. Your straw bedding crinkles with frost, and someone's frozen chamber pot cracked overnight. You don't ask who. You just sidestep the mess and shuffle into the corridor, where every breath echoes like it's trying to find its way back to a fire. Life in the castle doesn't stop for winter, but it definitely slows down. A little. The courtyard is mostly abandoned this morning. The training yard quiet for once. No one wants to spar when their fingers snap like icicles. The guards stamp their feet, cloaks pulled tight, and take turns standing near the torch sconces like moths pretending to be soldiers. You're sent to help the kitchen again, which sounds awful, until you realize the kitchen is the warmest place in the castle. Sure, the heat is uneven, and it always smells like something slightly burning. But after 20 minutes beside the bread ovens, you can feel your fingertips again. It's glorious. Winter brings its own set of challenges. First, food. With the harvest long over and fresh goods impossible to find, everything comes from storage. You see at first-hand barrels of salted meat, sacks of beans and lentils, jars of preserved fruits, and wheels of hard cheese stacked like treasure. There's a weird, quiet reverence in the storerooms this time of year. Every item matters. Every crumb is rationed. The cook counts everything twice, then counts it again. No wasting, she barks. Which is ironic because her helper just dropped an entire sack of barley. You pretend not to see. A strange historical tidbit. Some castles used ice houses to keep meat fresh even before refrigeration existed. Blocks of ice were packed in straw and buried underground. It worked surprisingly well. You wish someone had thought to build one here, mostly because you'd crawl inside it in summer. Now, though, you crave warmth. You linger by the hearth, pretending to scrub the soot when really you're just soaking up heat. The adults know. They let it slide in winter. Even playtime shifts in the cold months. No games in the courtyard unless you like falling on frozen mud. Instead, you invent indoor amusements, dice games carved from bone, secret mimicry competitions who can imitate the steward best, and something involving 2 sticks and a cabbage that none of you fully understand, but always ends in laughter. The noble children stay indoors too. They read, they practice music, they embroider. One of them builds tiny castles out of bits of firewood. The young lord adds a moat using a bowl of soup. It ends poorly. One noble girl, Lady Eleanor, decides to stage a winter performance in the Great Hall. She casts herself as a snow queen, assigns you and 2 others the role of dancing icicles, and demands you twirl while wearing veils made from cheesecloth. You twirl badly. She applauds. Everyone wins. Somehow, midwinter marks the turning point, the feasting of Yule. Or Christmastide, depending on the chapel's mood. The Lord might host a proper feast. You might even get meat. Last year, you had roasted goose and something called frumenty, which is basically sweet porridge pretending to be exciting. You loved it anyway. But before that comes preparation. Always preparation. Today, you're told to help with firewood. A noble task, but a freezing one. You carry logs from the yard to the hall, from the hall to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the chapel. Your arms ache, your breath smokes. One log falls on your foot and you contemplate abandoning life entirely. You don't. You limp nobly onward. Historians still argue whether castle winters were more dangerous than summers. Disease slowed in the cold, but accidents increased. Fires, falls, food shortages. These became real threats. People huddled together for warmth, which helped with the cold but did nothing for your personal space or general sanity. You remember one winter when the drawbridge froze shut? A group of guards had to pour boiling water over it just to let the supply cart in. The cart brought dried apples and candle wax. Everyone cheered like it was gold. Nights in winter are long. The sun disappears early, and the castle glows by torch and candle. You help light them carefully, nervously, hoping you don't drop the taper or set someone's hair alight. It's happened. Once. We don't talk about it. The halls echo differently at night now. Everything feels closer, like the stone itself is leaning in to listen. You hear mice in the corners, a drip from the ceiling, a wind through the window slits that sounds almost like whispering. You pull your cloak tighter and pretend it's just the weather. But the best part of winter sleeping, yes, it's cold. Yes, your blanket is more whole than fabric. But there's something about curling up after a long day. Limbs sore, cheeks warm from the fire, belly full of turnip stew and just sinking into the straw. The world outside fades. The stone walls hold you. The cold stays beyond them. For now. One girl brings a kitten into the dormitory. It's for warmth, she says. No one argues. You all take turns holding it like a furry hot brick. It purrs loud enough to drown out the wind. You love that cat more than you've loved anything in your life. Tomorrow might be colder, or not. It might snow. You hope it does, not because you like it, but because snow means no outside chores. It's practically a holiday. As you drift off to sleep, you listen to the others breathing, the slow crackle of the last embers, and the silence of a castle wrapped in winter. For now, you're warm. For now, you're safe. You wake with a groan in the realization that today is Bath Day. Not your choice. Of course, nothing fun is ever your choice in a castle. But the steward declared it, and when he declares things, people listen, especially when he starts muttering about lice. Now, you may think that baths in a castle sound fancy. Marble tubs, steaming water, scented oils. Let's crush that illusion immediately. The reality, Bevan big wooden tub, dragged into the kitchen because that's where the fire is, filled bucket by bucket from the pot that's been heating all morning. The water is never hot enough, and you almost never get first dibs. Right now, the tub already smells like soap and feet. A page just finished his turn, and you're second. Lucky you. You peel off your layers, dip a toe, and instantly regret every decision that led you here. It's not even that the water is freezing, it's the knowing that 5 other kids are waiting after you, staring, silently judging your splash style and questionable toes. Bathing is rare. Once a week if you're lucky. Once a month if you're average. And only when the lice stage a rebellion if you're truly unfortunate. Nobles bathe more often, but even they have to share the water sometimes. There's only so much hot water a kitchen can hold. A weird little historical fact: people believed bathing too often could weaken the body or invite disease. Some preferred to just change their underclothes more frequently and call it hygiene. Others rubbed themselves with cloth and herbs and hoped for the best. Perfume wasn't just for nobles, it was also a great excuse for not bathing. You scrub behind your ears and try to ignore the fact that this water has already seen 2 other bodies. A maid dumps a final warm bucket over your head and hands you a worn linen cloth that barely counts as a towel. You dry off while shivering near the hearth, where a chicken is currently roasting and judging you with one beady eye. Clean or not, your chores wait. Today, you're helping the laundress, which means water. Again. You join her down by the washing area, a covered alcove in the lower yard where grey soap, icy water, and aching knuckles await. Laundry in a castle is no joke. Everything from bedding to tunics to tablecloths needs scrubbing, and in winter, it's almost cruel. Your fingers go numb in minutes, but you dare not stop. The laundress is patient, but only in the way a hawk is patient. Soap is harsh and made from lye and animal fat. It smells effective. You scrub with it anyway, trying not to think about what it's doing to your skin. As you wring out a tunic belonging to one of the noble children, you notice a torn sleeve. You point it out, hoping for praise. You get more laundry. Recognition. Midday brings a break, sort of. You're sent to the herb garden, now more twig than greenery in this cold. The castle healer is looking for dried marigold and rosemary. You root around until your hands smell like half a kitchen and half a funeral. Castle hygiene is complicated. Water is both friend and enemy. Cleanliness is important, especially with so many people living close together, but access to fresh, warm water is limited. Wells must be drawn. Fires must be stoked. Time must be stolen from other jobs. One scholar once wrote that medieval cleanliness was defined more by odor than appearance. Basically, if you didn't smell like a dung heap, you were winning. To help with that, people used herbs stuffed in shoes, rubbed on skin, burned in rooms. The chapel uses incense for spiritual reasons. Yes, but also because it masks the scent of people who haven't bathed since Michaelmas. You've got your own hygiene hacks too. A pinch of dried lavender tucked into your tunic. A stolen swish of vinegar from the kitchen to rinse your hair. A little wool rag to scrub your teeth, which one older boy swears makes them shine like a knight's shield. You check in the reflection of a metal pitcher. Close enough. In the afternoon, you're asked to clean the latrine entrance. Pause for horror. Castle latrines, also known as garderobes, are simple. A hole in a stone bench that drops down the side of the castle wall or into a pit below. No plumbing, no privacy, no thanks. You bring a bucket of sand and a rag tied around your nose. One girl once said the castle ghosts live in the latrines because no one would dare follow them down there. You believe her more and more every time you do this chore, but it must be done. Clean latrines mean fewer rats, fewer flies, and allegedly fewer angry spirits. Historians are still divided on just how bad the smell in castles really was. Some argue it wasn't that terrible stone structures with good airflow helped. Others insist it was a sensory nightmare. Based on today's evidence, you're siding with Team Nightmare. When you're finally released from bathroom duty, you make your way back to the dormitory, exhausted and damp. A girl next to you picks fleas off her sleeve with practiced ease. Better out than in, she mutters, flicking them into the rushes. Nighttime is the one moment hygiene starts to feel like a luxury. You rub your hands with a little rosemary, wrap your feet in rags to keep warm, and shake out your bedding for good luck. The straw still smells faintly of goats. You pretend it doesn't. One boy declares he's going to bathe every day when he's grown and rich. Another says he'll never bathe again. Ever. You suggest something in between as you curl up, freshly scrubbed and half frozen. The world seems a little quieter, a little softer. Your skin stings from the cold, but it's a clean sting. It feels almost good. Tomorrow, you'll be dirty again, but tonight, you are the cleanest peasant in the castle. You wake with sunlight dripping through the high windows like honey rare, warm and fleeting. It's market day. You can tell by the clatter in the courtyard and the scent of something faintly resembling cinnamon wafting on the breeze. Or maybe that's just your imagination playing tricks again. Market days aren't just about buying things. They're events. Bursts of chaos wrapped in laughter and barter. Full of smells and noise and people who don't usually live within your stone-walled bubble. And guess what? You've been chosen to help carry goods back from the outer gate. You tie your belt tight, swipe the sleep from your eyes, and scramble outside. The castle's already buzzing. Guards argue about who gets to check wagons. The steward shouts about missing ledgers. Children like you run between stalls and carts, hands outstretched, minds already wandering toward what crumbs they might sneak today. Technically, most of the market happens outside the castle walls, just beyond the moat or near the village square. But since today's a major market day, vendors have been allowed inside the outer bailey. That's a big deal. You overheard the steward grumble about mud on the cobblestones and the fishmonger's smell soaking into the stone for a week. It's worth it, though. The castle needs things it can't produce itself: cloth, spices, tools, oils, even salt. That stuff comes in by cart or pack horse, guarded fiercely on the roads. Thieves know what's valuable. So do you. Your job: assist one of the castle's buyers, a woman named Tomma, who has the charm of a goose and the memory of 10 monks. She points. You lift. She nods. You tally. She haggles. You listen in and try to understand how she just traded 6 jugs of sour ale for 2 bolts of good wool. Magic. She tells you to keep your eyes open for fraudsters. They'll sell you rat meat and call it rabbit. She mutters. You nod solemnly and instantly start questioning every pie you've ever eaten. One historical note: market days were not just economic exchanges, they were cultural collisions. People brought news, gossip, foreign coins, stories, and music. Sometimes even jugglers or musicians. You've never seen a juggler, but someone today has a trained ferret. Close enough. As you pass a leather stall, you see a noble boy fingering a new belt with a jeweled buckle. He holds it like it might whisper secrets. His tutor frowns at the price. You smirk. That belt could feed 10 families. But sure, it matches his boots. Meanwhile, you spot a tiny stand with sugared almonds. Your mouth waters. The merchant catches your eye and raises one brow. You check your pocket's 2 wood buttons, a pebble shaped like a snail, and a splinter that's been there since yesterday. Not quite legal currency. But before you can walk away, the merchant flips you a single almond. For luck, she says. It's warm from the sun, crunchy, sweet, and so good it should probably be outlawed. Back at the wagons, you help load barrels, jars, sacks, and bundles. It's heavy work, but you don't mind. There's something exciting about touching goods from outside the walls. Soap that smells like lavender, cheese wrapped in cloth from another province. A small tin of dried oranges, exotic, precious, locked in the pantry the moment it crosses the threshold. There's even a mirror, a real mirror, polished metal, not the puddle reflection trick you're used to. You glance into it and see, well, mostly a nose. It's weird. You move on. The castle buys ink too. That's for the clerks and the chaplain. They keep records of food stores, grain levels, debts owed. Even which child is assigned to which chore, unfortunately. You saw your name in one once. Next to the word latrine, you burned the memory. A lesser-known tidbit: some children at court learned basic reading and math through exposure to markets. Not school, not lessons, just transactions. You're not exactly fluent in sums, but you've started counting in pairs and recognizing tallies, all thanks to this chaos. Toma lets you choose one thing from the reject pile. You pick a scrap of blue fabric, soft and frayed. You'll use it to patch your sleeve, or maybe give it to the girl who sews birds into her tunic hem. She deserves something bright. As the sun tilts toward afternoon, the market starts packing up. You help load the last cart and wave at the ferret trainer. The castle slowly folds back into itself. Gates creak shut. Guards return to their posts. But for a few hours, it felt like the world outside had come into play. The noble children show off what they got: new boots, a comb carved from bone, a charm on a string. You show off your fabric scrap and the almond memory still stuck in your teeth. Victory comes in different forms. Later, you're sent to deliver a jar of honey to the Lord Solar. You tread carefully, balancing the jar like it contains royal secrets. When you reach the top, you knock once, twice. No answer. You peek in. Empty. But you spot something on the table: a map. Old, curled at the edges, dotted with strange names. You stare. For a moment, the castle walls dissolve and the world beyond spreads before you. Oceans, mountains, cities, places you'll probably never see. But for now, the honey is delivered. The market is done. The sunlight fades. You climb back down, humming a tune from the square. A girl in the corridor offers you a bite of dried apple. You trade her your snail-shaped pebble. She accepts. The castle is quieter now. Bellies are full. Goods are stored. The almond merchant's scent still lingers in your memory. You sleep with your scrap of fabric tucked under your arm, one small treasure from a wide, wild world. And dreams of the market hum softly through the night. You wake to shouting, not the usual, grumbly kind. This is loud, urgent, from the ramparts. You're out of bed and on your feet before your brain has even caught up with your body. The castle is on high alert. You don't know what's happening. Not exactly, but something is. You hear galloping hooves, the clang of weapons, and someone shouting for the drawbridge to be raised. You're not trained for this. You're a child, not a soldier. But when you live in a castle, even as a servant or page or spare pair of hands, you learn what fear sounds like. You rush to your assigned place along with a dozen other kids. Every child has a job during emergencies. Yours is carrying messages and filling water buckets. You grab your bucket and head to the well without waiting for permission. The guards move quickly, closing off corridors, checking locks, barking orders. You see the steward standing in the middle of it all, surprisingly calm, directing with a flick of his hand. The lady of the castle is in the chapel with her children, praying. The Lord is already at the wall, sword in hand. Turns out, it's not an attack. It's a fire. In the outer bailey, a cart caught near the stables, and the wind is strong today. Fire, the one thing every castle dreads. Stone walls don't burn, sure, but the rafters, the thatched roofs, the bedding, the rushes, all fuel. You remember a tale about another castle where the great hall burned during a feast. People say you could hear the tapestries screaming. You help form the bucket line well to courtyard, courtyard to stable. You pass water again and again, your arms aching, your feet soaked, your eyes stinging with smoke. You don't complain. No one does. Even the noble children have joined the line, passing buckets with shaking hands. Eventually, the fire dies. The air smells like ash and wet wood. The steward calls for a head count. No one is missing. You exhale. The adults say you were brave. You don't feel brave. You feel exhausted, but also kind of proud. Because when the walls shook metaphorically, you held your place. Afterward, everyone's allowed to rest. For the first time in what feels like days, you're not assigned chores. The kitchen serves a thin but hot soup, and someone passes out dried cherries from the winter stores as a treat. Even the cook seems almost human. You sit in the corner of the hall, warming your fingers around your bowl. The noble boy next to you offers a piece of bread. You accept. You both pretend not to notice the soot on each other's faces. Historians often debate how prepared castles really were for disasters. Fires, attacks, disease. Some argue they were fortresses in name only, strong from the outside but vulnerable within. Others point to carefully organized routines, drills, and emergency plans passed down through generations. You've now lived the argument, and from where you're sitting, it's a little of both, a quirky truth. Some castles kept fire watchers on the night shift just for this reason, armed not with swords, but with sand buckets and sharp ears. The next morning, things are oddly calm, like the castle itself is catching its breath. People speak softly. There's less slamming of doors, less snapping of commands. Even the steward seems gentler, or maybe he's just tired. You help repair rush mats, wipe soot off the walls, and restack wood stores. The stable boy combs the horses, whispering apologies for the fright. One guard carves a new door latch from a piece of oak. Life resumes not perfectly, but persistently. You overhear two servants talking about how the fire reminded them how quickly everything can change. A spark, one says, and the whole world shifts. You don't quite understand what she means, but you nod anyway. Later, you're asked to help the priest in the chapel. You sweep ash from the entryway and light candles for those who want to give thanks. You light one for the stable animals, one for your friends, one quietly for yourself. Because being a child in a castle is more than chores and cold floors. It's about learning to live in a world that's always half shadowed by war, by fire, by rules. But it's also about finding warmth in the hearth, sweetness in stolen almonds, and comfort in knowing your place. However small, matters. As the sky turns pink beyond the tower windows, you sneak outside for one last glance. The castle glows gold in the setting sun, like a living thing that just survived a long winter, and so did you. The stars blink into view one by one, quiet little sparks against the velvet dark. Somewhere in the castle, someone hums a lullaby. A door creaks shut. A fire sighs into coals. You settle into your straw bed, blanket tucked under your chin, eyes heavy with the weight of a long day and a longer life. Outside, the wind brushes past the towers. Not angry now, just curious. The world feels still. The castle breathes around you, slow and deep, each stone warm from the day's fire, each hallway silent except for the echo of your own memories of laughter in the kitchens, of whispered secrets beneath the stairs, of almond-sweet mornings and shadow-thick nights. You're safe here, at least for now. The fire is out, the walls are strong, your friends are close, and the stars are watching, as they always have. You think about all you've done, all you've seen, the smell of winter bread, the rhythm of feast day chaos, the sting of a cold bath. You think about being small in a giant world and somehow still important. And with that, you let go of the day. Your breath slows, your thoughts drift. The castle fades into dreams and sleep, gentle and deep. Finally finds you.